we still have a number of people trickling through, but I think it's probably 2 or 3 minutes past the hour, so we will kick things off. So welcome everybody to this webinar hosted by the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, which we abbreviate to CILT. Our topic today is in the transit or public transport arena, intelligent transportation solutions to retain and increase ridership while offering enhanced and equitable services, specifically the TriMet approach. So my name is Andrew Young. I'm a board member and also chair of the US chapter of CILT's North American branch. For those of you not aware of CILT, maybe not attended any of our webinars in the past, we're a professional body open to everybody who works in the transportation and logistics industries. We have over 30,000 members in 40 countries around the world. And really our mission is to develop the art and science of transport and logistics through research, education, networking, and the sharing of ideas. Events such as webinars with industry professionals and experts are a typical example of the things that we do. Well, we also support the ongoing professional career development of members. So CILT has a host of industry-based training and has certifications which I recognize throughout the world. So today's webinar is the second in a series on intelligent transportation solutions, and it's the second one that's focusing on TriMet. TriMet being the Portland, Oregon Regional Transit Agency. We will kind of make reference today to that first one, which took place in February this year, but that is available, as with all of the webinars, on CILT's YouTube channel, which you can access through searching up CILT North America or accessing through our website. So today, I'm delighted that we're joined again by two speakers. The first one, AJ O'Connor, is the Director of Intelligent Transportation Systems at TriMet, and also Adrian Pearmine. And Adrian is now the Western Mobility Technology Solutions Leader at the consultancy STV. And I'll let both of those gentlemen speak a little bit more about their current role. And also, I think it would be interesting to have their background as well, because we really do have very rich experts in this whole area of intelligent transportation solutions. I'd just like to also add that we really do encourage questions during these events. We'll aim to keep time at the end so we can deal with those questions. So please, if you have any comments or questions for the speakers, if you can type those into the chat function here on Zoom, we will be able to pick those up and go through them later at the end of the session. We're scheduled for an hour today. Now, just before I do hand over to the speakers, just a couple of brief housekeeping items. First of all, if anybody gets disconnected, please just click on the link. We will make sure you get joined back in as soon as possible. We are recording today's event, so everybody's aware of that. As I mentioned, we post this on our YouTube channel, which has all of our videos on there as well. It will also be posted on our international CILT channel as well, which covers all of the different 40 countries that have similar events. Everybody should be muted, obviously apart from the speakers. So please keep muted, and if possible, switch off your camera as well, just so that we don't have any bandwidth issues during the event. And the final point I'd say is I will pick up at the end and kind of give more information about CILT, becoming a member, and how to access this event and other events. But really, for now, I think it's time for me to hand over to our speakers. So over to you.
Okay, I'll start off on the slide here. I had left up this very busy slide, which was the original announcement and promotion of this event, just to make sure that you were at the webinar that you meant to be at. This is a little less busy starter slide. AJ, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first, a little bit more of your background within the agency and background in general, and then I'll go and then we'll dive into the content.
Sure. I'm AJ O'Connor. I'm the Director of Intelligent Transportation Systems at TriMet. And what that means specifically at TriMet is that I'm over basically the operational technology. I report in the IT division to the CIO. Operation technology means that I'm over the major systems that directly affect service on the street in TriMet. So the bus dispatch system, the rail control system, electronic fare collection, CCTV, land mobile radio. Those are the major systems that I'm responsible for. I've been in this business for 36 years, and this project that Adrian and I are going to be talking about today is one of the most exciting ones that I've been involved with, and is really changing the paradigm when it comes to transit signal priority.
Okay, and I'm Adrian Piermine, now with STV Incorporated. I'm a little over 2 months here. When I say now with STV, when I started this project, I was with a consulting firm called DKS Associates, based in Portland, Oregon, and worked through the entire next generation transit signal priority system that we'll be talking about for much of today's presentation while with DKS. Been in the industry for approaching 30 years now, doing consulting work for transit and traffic public sector agencies for the most part, delivering intelligent transportation system and technology solutions. The last few years been really specializing more in emerging transportation technology. And so we'll talk very briefly today about some of the other connected, electric, autonomous, those types of things that I'm also doing consulting in. But happy to present and discuss the next generation transit signal priority system that AJ was referring to. So I'll start us off. As Andrew mentioned, this is part 2 of the series that we're given. It's hard to believe that part 1 was back in February, that we're sometimes it just feels like the other day that we gave that presentation. Down at the bottom of the screen here is the YouTube link that Andrew referred to. If anybody wants to take a quick second and screenshot, probably not going to leave this up long enough for you to write that down. I do have it at the end, and it's pretty readily available on this website as well. I'm going to recap a little bit on some of the key points that we talked about back in February. But what we talked about for about a half hour or more in February, we're going to talk about hopefully for about 10 minutes or less today. One of the key issues and opportunities that we talked about in February is the convergence of these new disruptive business models and new disruptive technologies that we're seeing in the transportation space. There's a lot of buzz around ACEs, or autonomous, connected, shared, electric, and really the convergence of those 4 new emerging technologies that are predicted to drastically change the way that people get from point A to point B. And we're really going to be focused more today on the mobile connected side of that, and shared mobility and how it connects in with transit. And then more importantly, really what transit is doing to not just stay relevant, but to thrive in this new paradigm. And AJ will talk about that from the TriMet perspective. There's some negatives that we talked about back in February. A lot of our urban centers, this is San Francisco that we're looking at here on the map, have found that our shared mobility options, Uber and Lyft and other car share programs, while they've introduced new forms of mobility options for our citizens, are in many cases having some negative impacts on congestion in particular. And the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Authority has a website that's active for the city and allows you to zoom in and take a look at different segments of the roadway network and see not just how much delay has changed over the years, but what they're estimating the cause of that delay is from some of the TNCs or the Uber and Lyfts as compared to other factors that are changing transportation. In addition to congestion, and actually one of the causes of that congestion is that our roadways simply aren't built right now to give Uber and Lyft and even in many cases taxis very many options for pulling over safely and picking up and dropping off passengers. So not only is this impacting congestion in those communities, it's also impacting safety in those communities. And those are two key issues that we want to solve. But as was pointed out a few years ago when some of these first studies were coming out, like let's not apply all the blame of increased congestion to Uber and Lyft. It really is still the private vehicle is the #1 cause of congestion, even in our urban centers that have rail and bus transit options. And so collectively, TriMet and other peer transit agencies are looking at how they actually use transit to connect with these other first and last mile solutions to help solve this problem that we see on this sheet and get people out of the single occupant or private owned vehicle and into other modes. So AJ, why don't you pick up here for some of the things that public transportation can do about this that we had talked about back in the earlier session.
Sure. What we talked about in the earlier session, what public transportation can do, and in particular what TriMet has been doing, is create mobility hubs. These are areas where all different modes congregate, and you can easily transition from one mode to another, to try and transition the industry towards mobility as a service, like a utility. Create multimodal trip planners, so you're not bouncing from one application to another to plan a continuous trip. You can plan across modes. Have the ability to use an advanced fare collection system wherever you're going is also one of the goals. And really, rail systems are built and designed to be in place for decades longer than buses. So the technology on those vehicles does not get refreshed as fast as they do on a fixed route bus. And we really need to change that paradigm and bring our rail systems up to the level of our buses. And Adrian, if you can go to the next slide, we can briefly point out what I was talking about. The upper left corner is a diagram of what a mobility hub would look like. On the right-hand corner is our open trip planner that allows you to plan, and you can add Uber and Lyft, or we even have the ability to plan part of your trip on a bike, and you can see the elevation where you're going. The lower left is an example of our electronic fare hop fast pass system. And the middle screen is what a bus operator can view on their mobile data terminal, shows them their route. We can send detours to it. And essentially, that's the functionality that we want to get on our light rail vehicle. And the diagram in the far lower right corner is of our light rail vehicle and the type of functionality that we want to bring to the light rail vehicle that we currently have on our fixed route bus fleet. Next slide. So what we're going to talk about the rest of this presentation is how transit is working with cities and other partners, and how we're combining infrastructure, policy, and investment, and specifically how we're focusing on corridors and high capacity service. And the one project that kind of wraps all these themes together is our next generation transit signal priority system. It really is a good example for all these points that we're trying to accomplish. Adrian, if you want to go to the next slide. So when we talk about next gen, we have to explain what the old gen is. And the old gen is depicted here. It is a optical transit signal priority system where the bus is emitting infrared and it is line of sight, and there is an optical detector that you can see with the arrow that's usually placed on the traffic signal pole that receives that signal and then passes that to the signal controller to make a decision on whether transit signal priority is granted or not. Now, 25 years ago, this was cutting edge technology. And at that time, TriMet was one of the first major transit agencies to implement any kind of TSP. But it has some limitations, and we are now addressing those. As this slide shows, it's hardware heavy. You have to have an emitter in the bus. You have to hang that optical detector on the light pole. That detector has to be cleaned and ranged. And as you can see, when severe weather happens, which is not uncommon in Portland, sometimes the signal has difficulty being received. Next slide. So this is how that legacy system is currently set up. You can see on the left side, there's the emitter that's on that bus. That's connected to an onboard computer that determines whether the bus is in a particular zone where TSP is present. And that onboard computer also knows if the bus is behind schedule. If those two conditions are met, then it will turn on that emitter. So it's really what we call kind of dumb TSP. It's very limited. It has to be in the range and it has to be behind schedule. And that's the extent of it. And you can see it's detected and then communicates to the traffic controller.
There's one other thing, AJ, I just want to mention on this slide on the existing or current gen architecture. We're also showing the onboard vehicle communicating over that cellular network to the transit center. So this architecture is communicating between buses and TriMet's dispatch center. So this is where bus operators can communicate with dispatchers if they have any sort of problem, security issue, or in an incident, as well as the transit center being able to communicate out to bus operators when there's detours or other things. But more importantly, for today's topic, there's a steady stream of data that's coming off of those buses that is talking about where the bus is, its heading, its direction, its speed, how full it is, other sets of data around whether turn signals are on and other types of things. And we'll talk about why that matters in the new architecture in a little bit.
This is the new architecture that Adrian was just referencing. And basically everything that he just mentioned, whether we've turned on the turn signal, whether we've deployed the lift on the bus, the bus is kneeling for someone in a wheelchair. Basically everything we know about that bus is now being sent via our cellular network into the Transit Signal Priority Cloud platform. So we went from basically very rudimentary TSP, whether it was behind schedule and whether it was on a route that had emitters and had detectors, to now we can make decisions on when TSP or priority is granted based on a whole host of other factors. How full is that bus? Where is the bus going? Is there a bus close behind it? the ability to refine when we request priority is greatly enhanced. Also, the other major advantage with the new generation system is we know exactly what happened when we requested that priority from the signal controller. We're collecting all that data and we can see that, whereas the previous old TSP system, really getting at that performance data, it was much, much more difficult.
And one other change that you'll see here is that connection line between the TSP cloud platform and the traffic center. So in the old architecture, all of that communication between bus and the traffic signal was happening right there at the local roadway level, as AJ talked about with the infrared emitters and receivers. And now our cloud platform is talking more directly to the traffic partners network. And that's pretty critical to how this architecture operates. So I'll pick up back here just for a couple of quick slides and then hand it back to AJ in a second. He mentioned the trends that we're seeing around transit agencies working directly with their traffic partners. And that's a pretty critical trend that we've seen in a number of markets. In the Portland metro area, this study was done quite a few years ago now with our traffic partners, the Portland Bureau of Transportation, leading the charge and doing a study on enhanced transit corridors. And we've seen similar studies in Seattle, where they call it speed and reliability. And many other markets are starting to look at this. And what's happening is that the traffic partners and the transit partners are both recognizing that they can't do high speed, high frequency, high reliable corridors by themselves. From the perspective of transit, they need their traffic partners to do things like queue jumps at certain intersections that will allow buses to jump ahead of other cars and get a dedicated signal for just a second, or business and access lanes that can be all day long or just in peak periods where buses have access to them. So there's a whole kit of parts that our traffic partners can implement on their traffic network and that transit can take advantage of. And so this is just one study. And within that, or within our Central City in Motion plan, which was a related study that PBOT also did, you can see that when done properly, this partnership between our cities and our transit can move a lot more people per hour per lane in buses than we can in the single occupant vehicle. So going back to some of those early motivators for why we need to be working together between traffic and transit, that figure tells a lot of it. And as we continue to invest in bike and pedestrian and have protected bike lanes and look at other modes like scooters and how they share that, we can again move even more people through these sections of our roadway network than we can in single occupant vehicle. So as AJ talked about, a lot of this comes together in one particular project. And if you can just kind of present the bigger picture of what the Division Transit Project is about, and then how TSP fits within that, AJ.
Sure. So the Division Transit Project was TriMet's first foray into essentially a bus rapid transit system. We picked a corridor that stretched from the east portion of the metro area into downtown Portland, and it required cooperation among 3 different governments: the city of Gresham, which is a suburb of Portland, the Oregon Department of Transportation, and into Portland, the Portland Bureau of Transportation. It was designed to be branded specifically FX, and we changed our color scheme for that. We procured 60-foot buses, articulated buses that had particular design features. the middle door, 3 doors, rear door, we have electronic fare validators throughout the bus as opposed to just in the front. We changed the streetscape along this corridor to add dedicated bike lanes. We improved the lighting and shelters at all these locations and really did a complete overhaul of this entire corridor. When this was in the early design stages, the question was asked, are we going to just carry over the existing old TSP system that we had? And that's when Adrian and I basically entered the scene and became involved in the project, initially looking at a study to compare what systems were out there. And that's when we made the decision to start the process of migrating from our old TSP system to this new cloud-based next generation transit signal system. So you see the cutout here of the buses and the various aspects that were improved on Division. And Adrian, if you can go to the next slide, we'll see an actual picture of what it looks like in practice. You can see the green line is the dedicated bike lane. It's kind of a little hard to tell, but we have much better signage and lighting at all these locations. Next slide. This is looking down Division in the corridor, and you can see the green bus in the right corner. And Adrian, if you can go to the map. So what you're looking at, that yellow arrow, is where the picture was taken and the direction that last picture was taken. So this is the entire route. It was the original route was called the Route 2. It was rebranded as the FX2 route. And the red rectangle box is where we implemented transit signal priority. The downtown core, we are not allowed to have signal priority in the downtown core. So that's why the section on the left does not have TSP. One thing to note about this corridor, it is radically different from the east end to the center. On the far right is the suburb of Gresham. And we're talking about kind of a typical suburb, wide streets, not very dense. And as you move in towards downtown Portland, it becomes significantly more dense. And it's really sort of a tale of two different applications. So it's kind of unique in that regard as well. But it's been a big success. Next slide. So this is what we eliminated on this corridor. We no longer required the onboard TSP unit for those dedicated FX route buses. We were able to do that because we have a dedicated fleet, and we did not require the detectors. They are on this route, though, for Portland Fire, who still uses the old TSP system. And here's the same new architecture slide showing what's in place now. We hadn't mentioned this before, but Light, LYT, is our cloud TSP partner. And you can find out more information on them if you Google Light, LYT AI. So where are we going with this system? One of the big advances with this system is not just the removal of the hardware, but this slide really shows the data flows and how that goes through our system. And like I said before, the big contrast between the old system and the new system is the amount of inputs that we can put into when priority is needed and where. We have so many more inputs than we did with the old system, so many more factors to consider on when we grant TSP. Likewise, on the right side, When the TSP is granted and processed, we now have the ability to really evaluate how that's performing at the individual signal level and along the whole corridor. So this new system really advances the capabilities and the analysis that we're able to provide.
One other comment just on this slide, as AJ talked about with the current or initial architecture, the signal's not aware of the bus approaching it until it gets within that line of sight and a given distance. And I say given distance because there's optimal distance if that equipment is clean and set up directly facing the emitters, et cetera, of a couple thousand feet. And that only degrades further from there. Whereas this cloud architecture, the cloud platform is sending estimated time of arrival of when the bus is anticipated at a given signal well in advance of when that signal could see the bus. And so the controllers themselves have more capability to try to get in alignment to either extend the green time and get the bus through that intersection, or truncate red times in other phases if possible, and try to get it lined up to where the bus is green upon the traffic signal is green upon the bus arrival. I want to just talk about our reality for the next few years. With this slide is basically just saying that while we'd love to get rid of that infrared local communications immediately, as we did along the division corridor, it's going to take multiple years for us to roll the next generation TSP out across all the existing corridors. And so we're going to have a hybrid reality TSP physical architecture for years to come, where that infrared is still used on corridors that have not swung over to the new system. So the drum roll now is how well is this system performing? The first indicators came from our vendors themselves. So Light took a look at a couple key performance indicators, one of them being average red light wait time. So the green line is showing the FX route going westbound from Gresham into downtown. The yellow line is showing from downtown out to Gresham. And what we're seeing is how long the buses over the length of that corridor were having to wait at red lights. The first dashed line, the blue line, is when we activated the next gen TSP. So everything to the left of it was kind of previous conditions along this corridor, where it was anywhere from a little under 7 to over 8.5 minutes of red time delay along the corridor. Then if you go to the right-hand side of this, you'll see that the system had kind of somewhat stabilized. There's still a lot of variability based on weather. We've got some snow and ice days in that period that really change things, holidays when there's not ridership, and general traffic is not as much on the corridor. So you see some variability there, but you'll see that it's kind of leveled off. The in between the two blue lines is an interesting piece of this. It's rare that we hear a lot of buzz around machine learning and artificial intelligence. This is one of the few cases where we can actually see it in action, if you will. The left-hand blue line was when we turned on the next gen TSP, and then over the course of just that next month, the Light system was ingesting the data, doing its algorithms, predicting when the buses were going to arrive at those intersections, sending that estimated time of arrival to the signals, and really getting smarter in a very quick amount of time, and then has stabilized since then. Similarly, another performance indicator that Light provided us very early on was green light success rate. So how often when the bus arrives at a given intersection, is it arriving at a green light? And so again, you can see that around 70% of the time is still pretty decent. The corridor had been optimized about as much and as well as you could do it with just regular traffic optimization beforehand. But then with the new TSP system, you can see that green light success rate jumped pretty drastically from a percentage standpoint. And once again, you see the artificial intelligence, machine learning piece of this in action between the two blue lines.
Adrian, can I add one thing on the green light success that is important? When you have that green light success, that means less idling, that means less fuel usage. And TriMet has definitely seen less fuel usage as a result. And that's one of the criteria, Andrew, I noticed in the chat you were asking, that determines success.
Yeah, and so fuel savings is a huge benefit to the agency. And then the greenhouse gas emission reduction that comes along with that is another benefit of this overall system. This slide takes a second to explain. So in addition to just getting some of those raw performance indicators from our vendor, we also needed to do a before and after study. The federal funding required this, and the agency and the partner agencies on the traffic side wanted this as well. One of the things we hadn't talked about before was the Portland Bureau of Transportation, PBOT's custom logic. So they, in addition to the TSP that Light is providing through this contract, PBOT had done some custom logic at the controller level over above what TSP was doing to better balance and prioritize bike traffic, pedestrian traffic, and improve safety along this corridor, and really try to optimize throughput of people in a safe manner along the corridor. So when we did our study, we would have normally done what we would call a before and after study, but the conditions along what used to be the Division 2 route to what has become the FX2 route have changed so drastically that there was no such thing as a true before and after study. We've reconfigured intersections, we've consolidated stops to where there's fewer stops located at different places. So it wasn't a true apples to apples before and after study. So we called it an on-off study. In the transit world, that oftentimes means that you're talking about ridership and people getting on and off buses. And so I don't want there to be any confusion. This on and off means we turned the system on, we turned the system off. And so we've done it in 3 different levels. One is turning all TSP, including PBOT's custom logic, off and looking at conditions without TSP. One, then we turned on Light's TSP solution, but left PBOT's custom logic off. And then finally turned PBOT's custom logic back on, kept the TSP on, and we're comparing all of those to a set of performance metrics. I only chose 2 of them for today's discussion because we're getting very close to the time when we want to switch over to Q&A. So one of them is corridor travel time. This is kind of one of the intuitive performance metrics that most people would think about along a corridor, is how long does it take me to get from point A to point B? But it can be a little bit misleading. We actually, even though this is a fairly long transit corridor, it's really not that far to travel. So we didn't anticipate seeing more than a couple minutes of savings running along this corridor on this particular performance metric, which is what we saw over on the right-hand side from east going west into Portland. It was really just that couple to few minutes savings. That was actually, we were happy to see that. What we were very pleasantly surprised to see was the eastbound movement from the city of Portland out to Gresham, and much more significant travel time savings than we were even expecting to see. But more important potentially than corridor running time, one of the performance metrics that is a bit more meaningful to transit is on-time performance. This really gets into what percentage of the time is the bus at the bus stop when it was scheduled to be there. And this is really important from a customer standpoint, and how well the system performance is perceived from riders. So again, we did our on-off studies with TSP off, PBOT off, and that's what you see on the left-hand side. This chart's kind of flipped around a little bit, where the top bars are from Gresham on the east side into downtown Portland. The bottom half is from Portland out to Gresham. TSP off, TSP on with PBOT's custom logic off, and then TSP on. And so what you want to be seeing is a high level of green and a low level of yellow. You want to see those buses on time and not late. And so what is also, it takes a second to kind of understand how to read the chart, but once you do, it's intuitive that if you're starting out in Gresham and you're heading westbound to Portland, so the very top of the chart, for that first segment that you see in the bottom right of the network itself, it's blue. You still have a pretty high percentage of on time because you haven't passed that many stops and that many signals yet. The further you go time-wise and distance-wise, the more you're expecting the on-time performance to vary and lates to increase. So when you go over to the TSP system on and see how small that yellow bar is of buses being late, that's extremely encouraging. And that tells us that riders are going to be happy that that bus is at the stop when it was supposed to be. One thing that we need to be cautious of with this new system is that red bar, because buses arriving at a stop early is not a big deal as long as they don't leave the stop early. So there's an operational issue. We've shaved so much time off of that delay that buses are arriving at some of these key stops ahead of schedule. So one of the other metrics that we care about that's maybe not quite as directly correlated here is ridership. You know, at the end of the day, what all of these different technologies are trying to do is improve performance, because we want improved performance to improve ridership. And for a number of factors, we talked about the reconfiguration of the stops, better bus stations and stops, better travel information, maybe a more comfortable ride in those new buses. We're not going to claim that this 40% more riders than the preceding year was all based on next gen transit signal priority, but we might want to claim a good percentage of it. And this project has been recognized on an international scale. The Institute of Transportation Engineers picked it this last year as Excellence in Transportation Award within their TSMO, or Transportation System Management and Operations category. So that was pretty exciting after all the effort that we had put in this to be recognized like that. So AJ, why don't you bring us home with what's next, and then we'll switch over to Q&A and still have about 10 minutes left here.
Sure. And I just wanted to go back, Adrian, one thing that we failed to mention in terms of advantage of the cloud-based TSP system is since it's not hardware-based, any bus that logs into the route can get transit signal priority system because it's cloud-based. And we had an issue with our new buses, a safety issue. They were brand new buses, and it required us to pull those buses off of the route shortly after we started. But because we had a cloud-based system, it didn't affect transit signal priority. The operator just logged into the route and they instantly had transit signal priority available to them. If we were hardware-based, we would have had to make sure that any bus that went on the route had the right hardware. So I just wanted to make that point that I forgot to mention before. So to this slide and to Adrian's point about where we're going next. So the FX2 route has been such a big success that the Portland region wants to replicate it in other locations. And this slide particularly is looking at our line 72, which goes north to south, and it's TriMet's workhorse route. It carries our most passengers. It also goes through a whole variety of different neighborhoods and different socioeconomic areas. As you can see, it's key for connections to downtown Portland. It has multiple light rail. MAX, if you don't know, we say MAX in here. MAX is our light rail system. So the planning to implement an FX style treatment on this route is already well underway, and this will be the next, probably the next large corridor where we'll see the next gen TSP replace the old gen TSP. So this is kind of an example of a large project, but there are possibilities where we might do smaller implementations that might happen sooner with our next gen TSP. Next slide. This is the next steps for the 72. As I said, it's ongoing. Because as you probably picked up on the discussion about division, because when we do an FX treatment, there's massive changes to the way the road looks, the sidewalks are improved. This requires a lot of community outreach and discussion and analysis of different options. And that's really what you're seeing here is sort of the schedule to get to a final preferred alternative and design, which we're hoping will happen next spring, and that we will, in late spring, hopefully move into real project development. And this last slide is important because this, what you're seeing, this is a map of the Portland region. And if you can see Gresham on the right hand, that's where the division line starts and ends and heads into downtown. What you see in sort of the rust or reddish color, that is currently where the footprint of all of the old TSP system. What you're looking at is pretty much Portland, the surrounding suburbs, with a few exceptions. You can kind of see a line here or there, but with a few exceptions, the old TSP system is not in our suburbs. It's pretty much downtown, the Portland city proper.
And so one additional point to be made here, AJ talked about us sort of getting brought in on the looking at the recommended technology to use for signal priority along the division corridor. And one of the things that we sort of recognized early on in that discussion was, let's make sure that whatever we pick, we don't pick in the vacuum, if you will, of just this one corridor. We've got this whole Portland metro area to be thinking about, and we want to expand transit signal priority into all these areas that are not covered in that rust color. So whatever we're picking as the next gen signal priority for, or as the signal priority system for FX, should be the next gen signal priority system for the agency and for the region. So we engaged many of these other stakeholders, Oregon DOT, many of these other counties and cities in the planning phase of that to get their input and buy-in from day one. So with that, Andrew, I think we'll hand it to you to help us walk through the questions that have been coming in. I think there might be a couple that were directed more directly just to me. And so when we go through all this, if we still have some time, I'll try to answer those ones as well.
For sure. But first of all, thank you very much, both of you, for fascinating presentation there. And I have to say, congratulations, not just on your awards, but the fact that Portland itself is now wanting to expand this. So that's a real credit to you in terms of how successful this has been. I think the other point to make is, although it's been 8 months since we had the first event, of course, we've now got 8 months more data. So it was good to see all of that success carry on right through to, I think, August was the latest data points that you had. So we have a few questions. I think you probably answered some of them kind of live as we was going through. I don't know if we just take them in order that we've got here. So I'll read them, and between you two, you can decide whether or not we've already covered this or whether or not you want to pick up. The first one is, so in the old generation TSP, how transit and traffic center coordinated. Just curious. Looks like the new generation is a significant elevation. So I think you'd probably agree with that comment that this really is.
Oh yeah. Yes, it's a massive improvement in terms of coordinating the traffic. And as Adrian said, the Portland Bureau of Transportation, which had the majority of the signals on the division line, added custom logic to even improve bus throughput even more than TSP. So they basically helped plan and reconfigure the entire route from the beginning. And then in terms of coordination with the old transit signal system, I'm not certain how PBOT set up their controllers initially. I don't know, Adrian, if you can speak.
Well, I think this question, just judging by the timestamp on when it came through, was when we had been still talking a lot about the architecture and hadn't really gotten into the before and after or the on-off study results. And so I think I don't think it means as much verbatim of a coordinated signal corridor. I think it's asking more about how well the next generation system is performing as compared to the old generation system. And so I think we answered that when we went into the findings, if I understand the question right.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, Adrian. I think it's more in terms of then the rest of the presentation talks about kind of the advantages of the new. So the next question actually was from me about the criteria for judging this success. I mean, so AJ, I know you covered that. I think one of the things I wanted to get at here was that, you know, it's not just the obvious ones. It's not just, you know, journey time and even, you know, additional ridership. I'm sure there's a broader benefits, things that will maybe take a number of years to actually come through. This could help actually with urban planning within Portland and the whole mobility and even equity as well. I know we had that in our title and probably didn't cover on that much. So I don't know if you wanted to just touch at a high level on some of the other criteria which were viewed as important.
So I've got a couple points on that, AJ, but it's
Go ahead.
Agencies.
No,
okay. Well, so let's talk about the equity piece, because that one, as you mentioned, is in the title. It's very important to the agency. And honestly, a lot of folks throw it around quite a bit, but then don't tie it back directly to what their project or what their technology did. And I think we have a chance to do exactly that. There's a lot of our riders in this region, and a lot of riders, particularly on this corridor, that rely very heavily on public transportation. In a lot of cases, it is their only or primary way of getting to from point A to point B. And AJ, you know, you almost was kind of joking a little bit about our weather here, but it's, you know, Portland's kind of known for rainy days and other problems. So when you have a transit corridor that people heavily rely on and weather conditions are bad, for example, you end up with a lot of people that have to go out and stand and wait at a bus stop for extra time. They have to build in buffer time if the corridor is not reliable. And if it's somebody who has already received a warning from their boss that if they're late again for work, they're going to be punished or fired, or if it's somebody that needs to pick up their kids from daycare at a given time, that level of reliability is so critical to them on a day-to-day basis that anything that we can do, and this technology is a critical enabling one that allows us to give better reliability to that network and better traveler information to our riders is really important. And that's tough to measure in the same sort of quantitative studies that we were doing before. We talked about delay, buses idling.
Can I add one thing there that's
yeah.
important? So this line, we didn't talk about it, but as Adrian said, it goes through a lot of areas where diversity is high, and it connects the suburb and the inner city to two major institutions, the Oregon Health Science University, which is the leading medical research and provider in the Portland region, and it connects to Portland State University directly. So you have a fast trip for people that either work, and Oregon Health Science University is the largest employer. It's either number 1 or 2 in the region. So it really carries a lot of people to jobs. It also carries patients to get to their appointments, and then students getting to Portland State University, or the medical or dental students that are going to the Oregon Health Science University. So that was one of the reasons that the line was chosen in the first place.
And then just to, I think AJ talked about this a little bit, but some of the other metrics we looked at as success, that red light reduction reduces idling, improves greenhouse gas emissions along the corridor. If we can translate that to a bunch of the other corridors that we see on this map, those will grow exponentially as both cost savings and environmental benefits for the region. And there's one big one that we probably aren't going to be able to take full advantage of on division for some time, but once you improve the reliability of a corridor and can really trust the new schedule times, if you will, of when buses are going to be at those intersections, you can remove a lot of the slack time that's inherently built into schedules, and up to the point where you can actually remove a bus from service, an operating bus from service at certain points. Again, we're not expecting to see that on FX2 anytime soon, but that alone, one bus removed from service over the course of the day while still offering same level of service is a savings of like $300,000 a year or something like that to the transit agency. So there's a lot of benefits. We should probably get on to some of the other questions here.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I know we're kind of coming up to the top of the hour. I think there was 2 other questions which we had, and AJ actually provided a comment. So in the interest of time, I'll probably just read those out. So how have the bus drivers reacted to this new system? And the drivers love the system. Initially, there was a learning curve, especially at the 7 locations where we had bus-only signals that allowed buses to jump ahead of regular traffic. But presumably, AJ, yeah, you're not getting labor disputes as a result of making their job easier. So, and I think that linked to this, I asked as well in terms of any negativity from other road users. And I think with car drivers, everybody's going to be unhappy if kind of they feel there are more red lights, but it's specifically the first responders point, and whether or not it's affecting other more critical other road users.
No, we haven't really gotten any of that feedback. And in fact, the Portland Fire Bureau is very interested in using this same system and upgrading how they do priority requests for the signal system. And they're actually exploring looking at implementing this and replacing their system.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I think if anybody has any further questions, you feel free to email those to us at CILT. Rebecca is the person that's advised you about the details and how to join. So I'm sure Adrian and AJ would be willing to kind of provide any further feedback. So thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for your time today. This was really fascinating. Thanks to everybody also that joined us today. Everybody's time is precious, so we do appreciate that. As I said, this recording is going to be available on the website. We'll send out the link to everybody that registered. We often send out surveys for feedback, so that would be helpful for us, even if your comments are about suggestions for other topics you'd like us to cover. And final thing I'd say is, if you are interested in CILT North America, you're interested in being a member, getting involved with our organization, then please go to our website, CILTNA.com. And also when we follow up, we'll send you information about joining. The very last point I would just say to everybody is, so next week is the APTA Expo in Orlando. I think many people here probably are going to that. I just wanted to mention that myself and also Arthur Gaudet, who's a fellow member based in the US of CILTNA, we're both going to be at the event. So if anybody wanted to reach out to us, please, I think they have an app where you can kind of connect with people. Our details will be on there, so please do that. Many of you might know Arthur already. He's an industry expert on-time performance, and I think he'll be there available for anybody who wants to quiz him as well. So on that note, thanks again, AJ and Adrian. We really appreciate that. I think we'll talk again whether or not we have a third installment of this. Maybe wait till we get more data in. Be fascinating to see kind of what's happening with the expansions that you're doing. Well, I'll wish everybody a good day, and thank you very much for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye.